r/ProRevenge. Speeding in my street, it's your fault, your truck's wrecked. Story 1. A few years back, a rather peculiar incident unfolded in my neighborhood. It all began when my kids were enjoying some quality time skating in a quarter pipe. Little did we know, trouble was about to roll around the corner in the form of a truck driven by a reckless Bubba. As fate would have it, my daughter emerged from the quarter pipe, catching Bubba's attention. Instead of slowing down or hitting the brakes and showing some consideration, Bubbs floored the gas pedal, accelerating past my house, while hurling obscenities that goes like, "Keep out of the road, morons." Naturally, I couldn't let this behavior slide, so I yelled, "Hey, slow down," hoping it might get through to him. But Bubba wasn't the type to heed warnings. On the following weekend when I was out mowing my lawn, lo and behold, I spotted Bubba's truck heading my way again. This time I decided to take matters into my own hands. I positioned myself at the edge of the street, attempting to signal him to stop. However, Bubba's response was far from what I expected. With a crazed laugh, he slammed on the gas once more, the engine roaring like a beast as he zoomed past, seemingly enjoying the thrill of it all. This guy was clearly unhinged. Determined to make a statement and ensure our neighborhood's safety, I made a trip to the hardware store and purchased 3-3-foot orange safety cones. To drive my point home, I attached signs to each one, boldly stating, "Slow down, residential neighborhood, kids at play." However, my attempt at promoting safety didn't sit well with Bubba. A few days later, I discovered the cones lying on the ground, run over and crushed. It was no mystery who the culprit was, and my anger was simmering at this point. In my frustration, a brilliant, if somewhat unconventional plan began to take shape. Back to the hardware store I went, this time grabbing 3 new cones, cement, and steel rebar. I filled those cones with rebar and cement, letting them set until they were solid as can be. Once my modified safety cones were ready, I strategically placed them by the side of the street near my house, complete with the same signs as before. The message was clear: slow down. It didn't take long for Bubba to make another appearance. 2 days later, as I was tinkering in my garage, I heard the familiar roar of his truck's engine. This time, he decided to take on the reinforced safety cones. The scene that unfolded was truly remarkable. Bubba's truck collided with the first cone, causing it to tip forward and rotate the base upward, lifting the front of his vehicle as the second cone took a direct hit. The impact sent his truck soaring even higher into the air. The third cone targeted his right tire suspension, bringing his truck to an abrupt, screeching halt. Fluid started leaking from underneath, and his passenger tire was pointing inward at a 90-degree angle. Needless to say, Bubba was seething with anger, yelling about how I wrecked his truck and how I'd pay for it. I didn't back down, challenging him to call the cops and explain how he had intentionally run over safety cones. We eventually decided to call a tow truck. As the tow truck took Bubba's battered vehicle away, I couldn't help but feel a sense of triumph. Surprisingly, I never saw Bubba drive down our street again after that incident. While I was initially worried about potential retaliation, nothing ever came of it, and we eventually moved out a couple of years later. The story has garnered more attention than I expected, and some have raised concerns about the legality of my actions. Let me clarify that this incident occurred a long time ago, and any legal time limits have since expired. I also have a good understanding of my rights and the law, and I was prepared to handle any potential consequences. Thankfully, it never came to that, and Bubba's reckless driving days in our neighborhood came to an end. Well, look at what we've got here. Self-entitled king of the road, this truck driver acted like he owned the streets, completely disregarding any consequences. His reckless driving was complete trash. It's seriously frustrating to see some people care so little about everyone's safety as they zoom around like they own the place, putting property, kids, and even themselves at risk. And what's with the unnecessary road rage? It's about time people learn some respect and stop throwing unfriendly words to others who simply want some peace and quiet. But props to the guy who decided to take matters into his own hands. He was just trying to ensure his family and the whole neighborhood stayed safe. Sometimes you've got to take a stand to protect your loved ones and your community. Give a reality check to those road bullies. And hey, he did try the polite route, reminding the truck driver about road safety. But it seems Mr. Speedy Gonzalez wasn't one for subtle hints. Speeding in residential areas is a recipe for disaster, and the driver's little game with the traffic cones only proved he thought he was above the law. Ah, cool, dude. Those cones were there as a reminder for road safety, not a thing for anyone to bump on. But Bubba decided to test fate, and well, in the end, even the mightiest truck couldn't conquer a cemented cone. His entitled attitude crumbled when reality hit. It might have wrecked his truck and bruised his ego, but he brought it all upon himself. Seriously, why mess with traffic cones in the first place? However, it's also important to remember that taking matters into your own hands, especially in a potentially destructive way, can have legal consequences. Looking back at how this story began, immediately reporting reckless driving incidents to the authorities might have saved everyone a lot of trouble. Of course, it's a different story if the driver would actually pay attention to the warning. In the end, this story is about a guy who went the extra mile to address a serious issue, ultimately making the neighborhood safer for his family. It's a reminder that we should all be considerate of others on the road and that traffic cones, speed limits, and all those traffic rules are there for a reason. So, as we hit the road, let's drive smart and show some respect for our fellow travelers, all in the name of preventing accidents.
Shh, here's a little secret for you. This video is sponsored by none other than me and my team at Rufus Rugs. We're the masters of creating custom, hand-tufted rugs that capture who you truly are. Whether you want to transform one of our intriguing thumbnails into a rug, for a friend, obviously, or you're craving a room makeover with awesome anime-inspired designs, we've got your back. Oh, and did I mention, each and every rug is skillfully handcrafted by me and my friends. No BS dropshipping gimmick here. You'll be blown away by your rug. Hit the first link in the description to learn more.
Story 2. I worked at a Toyota service department in South Carolina a few years ago, and let me tell you, it was a harrowing experience I'll never forget. The place was a bit of a nightmare, especially on a scorching hot day in February with no air conditioning in sight. Our service department was usually swamped with over 100 appointments a day, a split between 6 to 9 advisors. We had a mix of seasoned advisors who knew the ropes and a few newbies who were just starting to figure out that oil and 710 were basically the same thing. My pay was based on labor hours sold, parts profit percentage, and various bonuses for customer service and monthly sales targets. No minimum wage here, it was all about performance. One of the conditions of my employment was that I couldn't drive customers' cars due to insurance issues. However, my first 2 weeks on the job saw a change in management and a guy named Chad took over as our boss. Chad was supposed to be a hotshot, someone who'd turn our service department into a well-oiled machine. The problem? He came from a dealership that might as well have been stuck in the technological dark ages. He had no clue about the programs we were using or even what an emoji was. Wanting to help Chad out, I introduced him to some software solutions that could streamline our processes, reduce downtime, and keep our technicians efficient. I even got the necessary licenses for these programs and set everything up. I revamped our old programs to make our daily tasks easier. I despised wasting paper and walking back and forth to communicate with the parts department or check in loaner vehicles. One of the programs I introduced had a flagging system, making it easier to track car details, set priorities, and send messages to the parts department. Instead of typing out long customer concerns, we could click preset options, saving us time and ensuring accurate information. After 6 months, still no raise, no uniform contrary to what was promised, and plenty of unpaid overtime working on these programs. The breaking point came one sweltering Saturday. It was 95 degrees Fahrenheit outside in February with 90% humidity. And we didn't have air conditioning in the service drive where we greeted customers. Our desk fans had been removed and a single large fan did little to help. We were overwhelmed with appointments, 130 of them on a Saturday. I was alone, limping around due to an injury in my foot earlier in the week. We were short-staffed, technicians were walking out, and the new guy wasn't able to keep up. I covered for my friend who had to leave for a funeral, but then my boss left for lunch, dumping his tickets on me. I had 110 tickets to manage, assist the new guy, move cars around, and help customers, all while I was injured and had bandages. With no lunch break in the workplace, as I was told it wasn't legally allowed, like, what? I worked through the afternoon, rescheduling customers and trying to get everyone out. I even had to limp their cars to the front for them to leave after paying. To make matters worse, my boss returned and I had to deal with a furious customer who found a drop of my blood on a disposable paper mat in her car. She demanded to speak to my manager. I called my boss, but he was unreachable. I texted him, but no response. I then called the GM to explain the chaos, my injuries, and the 12-plus hours I had worked without a break. When my boss finally returned, he told me I wasn't allowed a lunch break and threatened to withhold my pay. At that point, I had had enough. I walked to my station, erased all of my work, deleted notes, spreadsheets, and reset everything I had customized for everyone. It was chaos, and I was done. My GM called and offered me a pay raise and fewer hours, but I knew it was too little too late. I hung up and drove away, leaving behind a chaotic service department. Chad was eventually let go and my friend moved up the ranks. As for me, I found a new opportunity at BMW, leaving behind the Toyota service department and the unforgettable day when everything just fell apart. Seriously, what went down with this guy was like next level misery. He brought some serious hustle and a burning desire to level up his work game, ticking all the boxes for a top-notch employee. He was one of those unsung heroes who quietly shaped society and kept the wheels turning in businesses. No mindless yes man trope here, his work ethic slaps. He even took it upon himself to give the new boss a crash course and become the company's go-to tech guru. But this guy faced a truckload of challenges. We're talking zero pay bumps, no lunch breaks, air that felt like it needed CPR, a workplace that was basically a danger zone with nails lying around, and don't even get me started on the toxic boss-employee dynamic. Even with all that craziness, he kept on grinding and not even the pain from his injuries could throw him off his game. That's some serious commitment. It's just mind-boggling that his dedication went so unnoticed. I mean, they couldn't even spare a lunch break? Isn't that a clear violation of workers' rights? Big yikes. So, bosses, it's time to take some notes. You've got to step up your workplace safety game, give props to your hard work and crew, and make sure your workers' rights are upheld. People like this guy are putting in more hours than you can imagine, and they absolutely deserve fair treatment and support. Remember, they're not just cogs in the machine, they're flesh and blood humans too. In such a messed up and toxic workplace, don't expect to keep your star players. Success is a team effort, and every employee deserves to reap the rewards of their hard work. This nightmarish work environment pushed this guy to hit the eject button and make a run for it. Let's raise our glasses to him for having the guts to dodge even more suffering. His story is a stark reminder that you've got to stand up for yourself when your work conditions start feeling exploitative. Knowing your limits and rights is key, and when it's time to say, I'm out of here, you just got to do it. Sure, the company lost an asset, but it's a wake-up call. Even the fanciest chair takes a tumble when one of its legs gives out. This story is basically a treasure map for spotting workplace red flags. Sure, chasing knowledge and that paycheck is important, but never forget to take care of yourself and make sure your grind is paying off. It's a lesson in knowing when it's time to find a job that jives with your goals and values. Ultimately, these experiences help you level up, not just in your career, but in life too. Story 3. Attack me? Get ready for doom. I have had migraines since I was like 3 or 4. Sometimes they start slow and sometimes they hit like a hammer. I can be instantly unable to function if they hit quickly. In college, this could be a huge problem. The only available medications just knock you out, so you didn't care that you hurt and wanted to vomit. During my freshman year, around 1987, I was at a party for my roommate's boyfriend's birthday. I had never had champagne and didn't know it was a migraine trigger. I took a sip or two of champagne and instantly got a migraine. We were at someone's house about 20 minutes away from the dorm. My roommate didn't want to leave the party, so she arranged for a guy she knew to drive me home. She had no idea what he was really like, she just knew him from a few parties. On the drive that I thought was to my dorm, the guy pulled over on the side of the road in an undeveloped area. No one was around. He roughed me up and left me on the side of the road. I didn't even know where I was, much less how to get back to the dorm or to a hospital. After a while, some lady found me curled up on the side of the road. She thought I was dead. Cell phones were not a thing, so she half lifted me into her car, wrote down where she found me, and drove me to the nearest hospital. I could barely speak enough to tell the hospital people my name. I was roughed up, black and blue by this guy. The hospital knocked me out for about 8 hours with pain meds and muscle relaxers once they were sure I didn't have a head injury. He only hit me in places that it would not show. My roommate didn't get home until about a day after I did. She was staying at her boyfriend's dorm room. She probably wouldn't have come home as early as she did, but her parents called at the same time every weekend, and she really had to be home for that. She was shocked when she saw how bad I looked. I asked her how she knew that guy and learned she didn't really. She was just at a party now and then. I wasn't happy with the situation or that she let some creep she barely knew drive me somewhere. She felt really guilty, but guys don't advertise that they like to hurt girls. She did have some information on the guy. He didn't live in our city, but instead went to a really Christian school with a great law school. He was in law school and was visiting for the party. His dad was a really well-known lawyer for a televangelist church. That was the beginning of what I learned about him. Remember, the internet was in its infancy and social media did not exist yet. I called some other people who knew him from the party and got some information from them. I learned his girlfriend's name. Then I went to the library and learned about his girlfriend, the church, the law school, the college he was at, etc. I had photos from the hospital. I had declined to press charges because even then I knew that it would be hard to prove. even with all the bruises. It would be my word against his. He was from a quote-unquote good family and went to a Christian college and law school. My family was not prominent, and I was wearing a miniskirt that night. At the time, it was normal for lawyers to smear victims based on what they wore, if they had a drink, especially if they were under 21, etc. I didn't want to have to deal with all of that. I just wanted to ruin his life without having it ruin mine. I got phone numbers for the dean of his law school, the head of the college overall, for his father, for his girlfriend, and for the person who owned his apartment complex. He lived in some fancy apartment owned by a guy who was a big donor to the college. It was for people getting master's or law degrees or medical degrees after they already had bachelor's degrees. The apartments were given out as a type of scholarship to the school, and they were supposed to be really nice. I never really went there, so I don't know firsthand what they were like, but I heard about them from this guy's friends. I wrote some letters, including tear stains that made some of the writing blur a bit. I included copies of the photos of my bruises. I said that I didn't want to press charges because I knew it would be an embarrassment to the college, the law school, the televangelist, and the guy's parents, or whichever one fit the person I was writing to. I just thought they ought to know because he could harm a member of their family or congregation or school. He could also be a huge publicity nightmare if he did this to someone else, and I didn't want that because I believed in their message that was sent to the church and the school. I called the girlfriend since her number was in the phone book and told her that her boyfriend touched and hurt me. She cried and said he had hurt her too, but she thought it was her fault. I told her that it was clearly not my fault. I was trying not to puke when he attacked me. I told her to stop seeing him and have nothing to do with him if he treated her that way. She said that her family would be upset as he was from such a good family and he was so well thought of at the law school. I didn't tell her that I was working on ruining that for him. I sat back and waited for things to happen after I mailed the letters. His family was shocked but not surprised. They wrote me an apology saying he had been in trouble before, but they thought he had gotten better after the church intervened in his life. Apparently, he hadn't, and they were cutting ties to him. The man who owned the apartments actually called me. He wanted to hear what happened to me so he could figure out if I was telling the truth. So I told him what happened and why I didn't press charges. He believed me and started eviction proceedings. A representative from the church called me to ask me to stop telling lies about the guy. I told them that they shouldn't protect the predator. I never heard from the college, but the dean of the law school called me. He asked if I told the truth and assured him that I had. DNA wasn't commonly used back then. It was first used in a criminal case that year. So it was my word against his word. Just the accusation was enough to have the guy kicked out of law school, especially with the photos of my bruises and the tear stains on my letters, which was the reason I wrote them out by hand and let myself cry while I wrote them. Apparently, those accepted to that law school should be above reproach. I don't know if they would have handled it the same way if I had tried to prosecute the guy, but since I was trying to keep it quiet so I didn't harm the school's reputation, it meant I was a good Christian girl who could be believed. I was actually surprised that the letters had so much success. I expected his father to send a letter telling me to stop slandering or libeling his son. The letter saying they were cutting all ties to him was a surprise, but a good one. Sadly, it indicated that I was probably not the first to accuse him. About a year later, I found out that he was working for a company installing carpet in homes. I called that company and told them that they were sending an offender into people's homes. I even offered to send photos of the bruises if they wanted them. The woman that I spoke to was horrified. Just the idea that he had been accused of violating my rights and that I cared enough to call when I learned he was going into people's homes was enough for her. I learned that not only did the company fire him, but they called other companies and told them what a liability he would be if they hired him. He had started to drink heavily by that point, at least according to the friends who knew him at my school. I went on with my life, got therapy to help me cope, eventually got married, and have had almost 30 years with an amazing husband. I don't know what happened to this guy, but I know he never became a lawyer, which was his dream. I know that I made his life a lot harder. I did Google him a few years ago. He has had many arrests and has spent quite a few years behind bars. I like to think that by getting him kicked out of law school and getting his family to understand that he was very much unreformed, I helped speed him into the defendant's chair in a courtroom. Man, we can't let anyone go through something as messed up as this ever again. Seriously, that girl's experience was beyond horrifying. I mean, any story with these kinds of circumstances just boils your blood, right? That guy's complete disrespect for women is like a textbook example of wickedness. He didn't even stop to think about the pain and suffering he caused this girl and his own girlfriend. It's sad how so many victims of these cases struggle to speak up because of the trauma they endure. But this girl, she's no pushover and showed incredible strength. She didn't just defend herself, she also watched out for other women who might have been caught up in this guy's mess and made sure he paid for what he did. That's one seriously strong woman right there. And can you blame her for wanting justice? She exposed all the awful stuff he did, not just to herself, but also to his own girlfriend. That, my friends, takes some serious guts, and let's not forget the obstacles she had to overcome too. It was like trying to navigate a maze of challenges just to find evidence and reveal the truth. I can't even imagine the stress she must have faced. Back in those days, there was no social media to help spread the word, making everything even tougher. And she had to deal with the whole of society putting this guy on a pedestal because of his church and law school connections. But despite all of that, she pushed through. Her goal wasn't to humiliate the guy, she just ripped off his good citizen mask. She took it upon herself to wake people up and shine a light on all the messed up stuff this guy was doing. That's one survivor who stood tall, determined to break the cycle of misogyny, toxic masculinity, and violence against women. No more victims. That's what drove her. That guy got what was coming to him. I mean, sure, people can change, but those crimes, they can't be undone. Even if he didn't face legal consequences for what he did to that girl, his messed up behavior just led him down an even darker path and left him locked behind bars. Let's be real. It's time for everyone, no matter their gender or orientation, to treat each other with respect. We can't let those atrocities continue to the next generation. Maybe it wouldn't hurt to not instantly trust a stranger you meet at social events. Just have to be more careful. So if you enjoy these stories, you won't want to miss r/MaliciousCompliance. Fire me anytime. Story 2 is fantastic. Also, be sure to hit that like button and subscribe to our channel to stay in the loop about our upcoming videos. It also helps out a lot. I'll see you there.